aspirations remain the same and have become even more pronounced today. But we may have to take a different course of action as we deal with the new normal. Now, more than ever, a whole of society and a whole of government approach is needed to overcome this health crisis and get back on track. Led by the National Economic and Development Authority, the government updated the Philippine Development Plan, or PDP 2017 to 2022, to enable the country to effectively respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, quickly recover, and then transition to a new and better normal. The strategies have been made more responsive to current, emerging, and future needs and challenges in different areas and sectors. We aim to be better prepared and more resilient to any kind of disasters. The updated Philippine Development Plan remains true to the socio-economic agenda of the administration and takes account of our international commitments, including the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. More importantly, it continues to build a strong foundation for Ambisyon Natin 2040. In the first 3 years of implementing the Philippine Development Plan, several targets were achieved, and some were even surpassed. We were able to pass landmark economic, social, and governance reforms for much easier and faster delivery of services for the most vulnerable groups. Significant reforms have also been passed to ensure that our tax system is simpler, fairer, and more efficient, and that we have enough revenues to fund key programs.
Amid the overwhelming challenges brought about by the recent natural disasters and pandemic, I call on everyone's continued support. Let us remain relentless in our pursuit of Ambisyon Natin 2040. The government assures everyone that it will be in the forefront of this journey.
Equipped with the many lessons learned from this difficult period, we will move forward as one healthy and resilient nation. Ituloy natin ang ating aksyon para sa ambisyon.
A pleasant morning, everyone. Welcome to the fifth session of our series of Economic Fora on foreign direct investment and proposed economic amendments to the 1987 Constitution. And our subtopic for today will focus on arts, entertainment, and advertising to steer the Philippine economy. We have invited speakers that will be able to discuss these topics interestingly, and I am excited that we can once again learn from this session on how our economy can rise despite the damages brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. I am Izza Laurio from the DILG Center for Local and Constitutional Reform, and I will be with you as your host for today's discussion. This series is led by the Department of the Interior and Local Government, and our co-organizers are the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung Philippines Office, Center for Research and Communication, the Center for Strategy, Enterprise and Intelligence, or the CENSE, the Development Academy of the Philippines Graduate School of Public and Development Management, Philippine Society for Public Administration, and Blueprint.PH. So a few announcements before we begin our webinar. May I remind that participants in this room will be able to interact through the chat functions of our Zoom. You should be able to find the chat box down at the bottom of your Zoom screens. And we have a lot of participants, so to avoid confusion, panelists will see only videos and of the moderator and of their panelists. So if you have questions, we highly encourage you to put them up on the chat box, and we will get as many as we can later during the open forum. Please also be informed that certificates will be issued to participants in the Zoom meeting room by request after they have attended the session 5 and 6. So watch out for the request link on your email, and no need to chat your email address here, as we will be only catering those requests in the Google form. Now let us begin and pause for a moment of prayer.
Prayer Against COVID-19 by Bishop Ephraim Tendero. Our Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, we come before you today on behalf of our nation, the Philippines, now under extreme threat of the COVID-19. We praise you that you neither slumber nor sleep, and you are watching over our land and our people, especially in these perilous times. Our help comes from you. We cry out for your mercy and protection against this virus. We declare that you alone are our refuge, our place of safety. We pray that you protect our people from this deadly disease and rescue our land from this dangerous trap. Grant our President and all our national and local leaders wisdom and understanding as they establish and implement guidelines, measures, and strategies in fighting against COVID-19. Enable our health officials and medical personnel with your strength and power as they attend to the sick and vulnerable, and help many others to stay healthy. Lead the medical scientists here and around the world who are working double time to find the antidote to COVID-19. In these dangerous times, grant us your grace and peace to stay calm and to overcome fear, because the spirit of fear does not come from you. Instead, you have given us faith, hope, and love. You have given us power and a sound mind. Your word says that you will keep in perfect peace those whose eyes are fixed on you. Finally, we pray that in the midst of this pandemic, you will unite our people in love, bind our nation in peace, and bring hope and healing to our land with your grace and your power. In the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Prayer against.
Okay, so I know we have a lot to discuss today, but let me have this time to recognize some people and groups that are with us today. Ms. Pamela Dayan Carbonell, the Chief Project Officer of the DILG Center for Local and Constitutional Reform. Ms. Tonette De Jesus, the Senior Project Manager of CAS Philippines. Honorable Martin Andanar, the Secretary of the Presidential Communications Operations Office. Ms. Ella Kristina D. Coronel, the Research Director of Blueprint.PH. Mr. John Forbes, the Senior Advisor of the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. Dr. Bernardo Villegas, one of the framers of the 1987 Constitution and currently the Research Director of the Center for Research and Communications. We also have some participants from the various government agencies. Mayor Josie Bonifacio from the LG from Cortes, Mayor Hector Ruel Pascua from the LGU of Pudtol, Mayor Mary Joyce Roquero from the LGU of Valderrama, Mayor Romeo Salda from the LGU of La Trinidad, Mayor Orlan Calayag from the LGU of Dolores Quezon, Mayor Josephine Bangsil of the LGU of Luna Apayao, Mayor Peter Cuba of the LGU of San Andres Catanduanes, Mayor Sinforzo Sarmiento Jr. from the LGU of Virac, and the Assistant Secretary of the Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy of the DFA, ASEC Eduardo Martin Meñez, Assistant Secretary of DOLE, ASEC Philip Paredes, Assistant Secretary of Presidential Communications Operations Office, ASEC Ana Maria Paz Rafael, Director 4 of the Office of the Cabinet Secretariat, Ms. Mary Christine Joy Paras, and the Director of DFA, Mr. Chad Jacinto, and the OIC of the Office of the Director of the DOST, Ms. Angeli Alviar, and from the DILG as well, Mr. Danilo Nobleza, and Director 3 of the Office of the Civil Defense, Ms. Texon Lim, and Mr. Bernardo Rafaelito from the Office of the Civil Defense as well. and various DILG regional officers, provincial, municipal, and city directors. We also have various participants from different schools and university from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, and of course, private and business sector participants. So, and of course, I'm very glad to note the presence of our friends from the academe, the civil society sector, regional to field offices of various NGAs, business groups, and all relevant sectors with us today. I may not mention everyone, but please be informed that our secretariat has duly noted all your registration details. Now, to formally open this session, let us hear a message from the Chief Project Officer of the Center for Local and Constitutional Reform, Ms. Pamela Dayan Carbonell. Ma'am, good morning.
Yes, thank you, Izza. Thank you, team. Good morning. On behalf of Undersecretary Jonathan E. Malaya, Executive Director of the Interagency Task Force on Constitutional Reform, or IATF Core, allow me to greet and acknowledge our partners and guest speakers this morning. Again, the Senior Project Manager of the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Ms. Tonette de Jesus, to the Secretary of the Presidential Communications Operations Office, Honorable Jose Rupert Martin Andanar, the Senior Advisor of the American Chambers of Commerce of the Philippines, Mr. John Forbes, Ms. Ella Kristina D. Coronel, the Research Director of Blueprint.PH, Professor Eric Daniel de Torres, the Supervising Project Officer for Policy and Research of the Center of Local and Constitutional Reform, our partners from Centers, Strategy, Enterprise, and Intelligence Expertise, or SENSE. Before we proceed, please allow us to take a few moments as we pay tribute to the legacy and contributions of the late Secretary Gary B. Olivar to the country, especially in fighting for economic reforms. Sec, thank you for the gigantic contribution in this endeavor, and we are missing you very dearly. So we continue with Dr. Dean Lezan Perante Calina, the Dean of DAP Graduate School of Public and Development Management and President of the Philippine Society for Public Administration, Dr. Bernardo Villegas and the Center for Research and Communication, and civil society partners represented by the Core Movement Chairperson, Attorney Vicente Reville. Welcome to the fifth leg of our series of economic fora, opening the economy for recovery, arts, entertainment, and advertising to steer Philippine economy. It is evident that the COVID-19 pandemic has devastated the Philippine economy, but at the same time, stressed and tore down the arts and entertainment industries. Arts and culture have experienced significant economic setbacks from the pandemic. And with the widespread closure of companies, businesses, and various sectors and industries, the economy fell into a deep recession. But amid the daunting challenges, art communities, artists, filmmakers, and performers found innovative ways to adapt and survive during the pandemic, changing physical environment to online, contactless, digital environment for safer engagements, and creating strategies to revive creative talents. But it's not enough. The effects have been profound, and so are our complex solutions to open up the economy to foreign direct investments for foreign skills, technologies, opportunities, and creative industries to come in. And as we eagerly aim to revive the economy amid the unprecedented disruptions of the pandemic in a variety of ways, opening up the economy for foreign direct investments is ultimately necessary now more than ever. First is to find ways to revitalize arts and entertainment industries in the country. Open opportunities to explore foreign culture, technologies, and especially transfer knowledge and skills for our Filipino artists, cultural workers, filmmakers, advertisers, and media practitioners. And expand creative industries in the country by drawing other players to come in and develop essential initiatives for our local art communities and talents. Arts, entertainment, and creative industries are increasingly being used in healthcare, manufacturing, education, and economic development initiatives. Therefore, many of these sectors rely on creative industries. The whole of nation approach to confronting economic challenges and opportunities become apparent as the fields of arts, entertainment and culture and advertising have potential benefits for not only boosting the economy, but promoting our talents on the world stage. They touch the economy at leverage points, such as innovation, revitalization, entrepreneurship, and employment. The innovative economy within a creative ecosystem. So how do we rebuild and reimagine these industries amid the pandemic? Some of you might ask the same question, but let's not forget that the government has a giant role to let the public know and feel that there are cohesive plans to provide jobs and opportunities to millions of Filipinos to reinvigorate our economy. Because of the impact of the pandemic to our jobs and businesses is no joke. To add a layer of complexity when analyzing the arts, entertainment, and advertising sector, we will be hearing vital points in the discussion because our panel of speakers will be talking about the need for foreign economic reforms and to open up the economy to foreign direct investment and its impact to the said fields. Each one of us has a role to play as well. The kind of public discourse is an essential tool to flesh out the need for economic reforms and the benefits to each sector immensely affected by the pandemic. We have to take part, listen, and ask questions for an inclusive discussion on economic reforms. Dahil lahat naman tayo ay apektado at magbe-benefit nito sa huli. We can achieve creative economy, a creator economy, through these creative industries, but we have to provide the competitive edge besides pure talent, which the proposals for economic reforms offer. May we have a very fruitful discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pam, for your opening remarks. Now let us hear an opening message from one of our partners for the series of economic fora and a longtime partner of the DILG, the Senior Program Manager of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, or the CAS Philippines. Let us all welcome Ms. Tonette de Jesus. Ma'am, good morning.
Good morning, Izza. Good morning, speakers, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends. My name is Tonette de Jesus, and I will be giving a message on behalf of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, or CAS Philippines, for this webinar, Opening the Economy for Recovery, Arts, Entertainment, and Advertising to Steer the Philippine Economy. Thank you first and foremost to the Department of the Interior and Local Government, or DILG, for organizing this webinar, as well as to our other partners. Thank you to CAS's close friend and partner, John, Undersecretary of the DILG, Pam, Chief Project Officer of DILG Center for Local and Constitutional Reform, or CLCR, CLCR Supervising Project Officer for Policy and Research, Professor Eric De Torres, Presidential Communications Operations Office Secretary Martin Andanar, Blueprint.PH Research Director Ms. Kristina Coronel, American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Senior Advisor Mr. John Forbes, and our moderator, CLCR's Project Development Officer for Policy and Research Ms. Izza Laurio. And of course, a special thank you to Jerome of CAS Philippines for working with the DILG on this webinar. Before the pandemic and its subsequent quarantines and lockdowns, arts and entertainment allowed us to escape, to relax, to become inspired, to become more thoughtful, and perhaps more inward-looking. In the midst of the pandemic and while being on lockdown, we valued all the more the importance of the arts and entertainment as we tried to find ways to boost our mental well-being. Whether it was binging on a Netflix series, going on a virtual museum tour, listening to our favorite music bands, catching a limited release of a play on the web, or watching a live online concert, the list goes on. And as expected, the arts, entertainment, and even advertising industries were still as creative and innovative during the pandemic as it was before. And they used that creativity and innovation to somehow reach the public and still try to mimic the experience of a live audience. But as mentioned by Pam, there are challenges definitely, but they have been coping. And as with most DILG webinars, I always try to come up with questions that I hope that our resource persons can somehow address. Question number 1. The pandemic has changed and will forever change the arts, entertainment, and advertising landscapes. What are these changes and how will it further change, positively or negatively, if the economy opens up further to foreign investments? Question number 2. With the heavy influence of social media and the proliferation of fake news, how can both the entertainment and advertising industries help counter fake news, serve as a safeguard, and even become accountable when any of them or their stakeholders and supporters uphold and spread fake news? And lastly, question number 3. With the upcoming campaign and election season, where the battlegrounds will most likely be waged online and broadcast media instead of on the ground due to the pandemic, how can the arts, entertainment, and advertising industries hold itself accountable for responsible endorsements or support of candidates, political parties, and platforms, ensuring that no false narratives are propagated? How can they be used as helpful tools to support a well-informed electorate? And on that note, I look forward to the presentations and open forum. On behalf of Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung or CAS Philippines, thank you so much for your kind attention and good morning.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tonette, for your message, and those questions you raised are very interesting. I hope our speakers can take up some of those during the open forum. So since our session today is all about media and arts, it is our honor to have our next speaker. He completed his Bachelor of Social and Political Studies and Film and Media Studies at the Federation University in Australia and continued as Senior Executive Fellow in the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. These were subsequently followed with different stints at Georgetown University, taking up an executive course in public and nonprofit management at Northern Illinois University for International Visitors Leadership Program, the National University of Singapore for Communications and Public Policy Delivery and Countering Violent Extremism, and finally, a master's degree in entrepreneurship from the Asian Institute of Management. He has at various times been a TV news anchor, radio commentator, podcaster, video and audio blogger, and a voice-over artist, none of which compares to his present position as the head of the Presidential Communications Operation Office and the duties attendant to it, which include his groundbreaking projects and policies like the Freedom of Information Presidential Task Force on Media Hub or on Media Security, the Mindanao Media Hub, Government Strategic Communications Academy, and others. Our guest has also recently been commissioned in the Reserve Force of the Armed Forces of the Philippines with the rank of Commander in the Philippine Navy. But more than the academic and professional achievements, our guest has remained a provinciano at heart, a boy from the islands who to this day speaks Bisaya like he never left. And ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Secretary Martin Andanar.
Usec Jonathan Malaya, Undersecretary for Plans, Public Affairs, and Communication. Dr. Bernardo Villegas, Research Director, UANP, Center for Research and Communication. Ms. Tonette de Jesus, Senior Program Manager, Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung, Philippines. Ms. Kristina, Coronel, Research Director, Blueprint.PH. Mr. John Forbes, Senior Advisor, American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines. To the attendees, good day, everyone. One simple line from President Rodrigo Roa Duterte may well underline our topic for the day. When asked about the status of this administration, he said, "Look around you. Look around you and see the magnitude of the infrastructure that spans the entire landscape of our country with roads, bridges, sea, and airports, interlocking highways and skyways, reducing travel time and traffic within the metropolis, continuing construction of media facilities wherever the need demands, and the opening of more light railway systems, trains, and look around you and see the IATF EID nation, wide network of the ongoing vaccination, the imposed calibrated quarantines, a number of lockdowns, the forced or preventive isolation requirements, and the continuing strict implementation of health protocols for the public, especially for the seriously virus-affected cases. Look around you and see the progressive easement for physical movements of people in business establishments, industrial complexes, eateries, hotels, malls, land, air, and sea transport, tourist locations, places of worship, and other specified areas where physical distancing is still to be properly enforced. These form the background components of the economic amendments for the so-called opening of the economy for recovery, for the arts, for entertainment, and for advertising to steer the economy, which are contained in the need for this constitutional reform forum. And these are simply surgical constitutional amendments. As stated, the surgical treatment is expected to separate, discard, disjoin, or take apart specific economic provisions of a verbose 1987 Constitution. There is need for more serious and meticulous study, comprehensive review, and the exactitude in the use and the choice of words for the ideal intent. The look around you items I mentioned above do not have the graphic and real picture of our economy at the present time. 15 months of a serious pandemic have disfigured the economy, and surgery of whatever manner may not suffice. We need to go into the very essence of an economic policy that needs to be enshrined in our fundamental law and should now contain the safety nets for pandemics, disasters, climate change, the region's political, military, and commercial influences, and the changing hegemony of either diminishing or increasing world powers. As a final thought, we must be aware that technological advances are already a daily occurrence, and our digital distanced world of communication must rise to the demand levels competing with artificial intelligence and threatened by cyber attacks. E-commerce is slowly getting antiquated. So, too, with cash, face less transactions, and new world currencies other than the American dollar or the British pound may already be on the line for circulation. These are some cogent imperatives for the constitutional economic provisions, that surgical replacements may not be sufficient nor totally effective. At best, let us rally the best of our minds for this forum and look around for the best of our economic reforms. Thank you, and my acknowledgement to the participating institutions.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that warm and informative message from Secretary Martin Andanar. So before we proceed to our next speaker, let us have a quick poll. So our poll question is, are you in favor of opening up the economy, which can help foster the arts community, entertainment, and advertising in the Philippines? Okay. So I hope everyone will participate in our poll question. So while we are waiting for the results, let us first acknowledge also the presence of Mayor Francis L. Fontanilla and VM Divine Fontanilla from LGU Bacnotan, La Union. Okay. So we are down to our results in our poll. Okay. So for the results of our poll question, are you in favor that opening up the economy can help foster the arts, entertainment, and advertising in the Philippines? Okay. So I think let's check the results of our poll. So 130 of the participants, or 94% of our participants, said yes, while 8, or the 6% of our participants, said or voted no. So now let us proceed to our next speaker. Okay, so our next speaker who will be talking about the topic social media sentiments on entertainment industry. Our speaker is currently the Blueprint.PH research director. She is a holder of a master's degree in communication research and undergraduate degree in sociology. She specialized in knowledge management and research consultant for international multilateral banks and development organizations. As research director, she leads Blueprint.PH sentiments analysis and social media big data research. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Miss Ella Kristina Domingo. Ma'am, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me well? Okay, so let me first acknowledge um, my co-panelists and the organizers of this event on opening the economy for recovery, arts, entertainment, and advertising to steer Philippine economy. So I want to say good morning to Ms. Pam Carbonell, Ms. Tonette de Jesus, and Mr. John Forbes, who was one of my first clients when I was starting out. Okay, so for this morning, I'm just going to give you a run through of um, how Filipinos um, like or how they are able to express their interest in entertainment industry. We have big analytics data, and I'm going to show you a lot of data, so please bear with me. But this is going to be, I hope, an enjoyable presentation because this is about entertainment. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is the outline. So what are the new trends brought by the pandemic? We're going to run through it. So much have been said of how the pandemic was able to suppress or stop some operations, especially in the entertainment business. I'm going to give you some numbers and what are the trends and sentiments on entertainment advertising industry. From our monthly monitoring Facebook trends, and what are these new examples of entertainment activities, and what are the advantages of digital platforms. This is where FDI will come in, the emerging issues, and some of the things we have to look at. Okay, next slide. Okay, so why do we need FDIs at this time? First, we're going to see what's in moving forward. We are in the industry 4.0 era. So after this, when the economy opens up, when limited movement has stopped, now what is happening? So number one is we have rapid technological progress. We can see micro businesses up to the biggest government agencies double timing their digital transformation strategies. Number two, everything's digitized. Now we pay via e-wallets. Before it was unimaginable and we were so insecure about it. But now when ordering food and all things, it's all digitized. And this has formed new forms of global linkages. So before we were just amazed with Facebook and how we are able to talk to our friends. But now all activities, almost all economic activities, new forms of economic activities are now in the cloud. And this will bring about structural changes, obviously, when it comes to banking, education, even governance, and of course, entertainment. And lastly, these things have also brought about high social impact and economic returns. We don't have the numbers yet, but let's go to high social economic impact. The new digital platforms or this rapid technological progress have brought about small social impact activities brought about by the entertainment industry, which I will emphasize later. Okay, next slide. Okay, so let's see. Right now, according to Hootsuite, My reference here is the Digital Philippines 2021 from Hootsuite. We are 100.3 million Filipinos, of which where the data is coming from, 16 to 64-year-olds, or 63%, are using is composed of the 63% of the population. 152.4 million have mobile connections. It means that some Filipinos have more than one mobile connection. And then 74% are internet users. And of the 67% or 74 million internet users, 89 million are active social media users, meaning there could be more than one account or several accounts of social media. So this is the profile of the Philippines and the data that we are looking into, basing into. We have 63% of the 110.3 million who are 67% internet users and are active in social media. Okay, next slide. So what are the online activities based from Hootsuite? So of those active internet users, almost 100% watch online videos. YouTube is the #1 social media app, followed by Facebook. So those two are very strong. 83% watch vlogs. So these are also in YouTube and TikTok, another emerging app that is very popular. Music streaming, which can be found in YouTube, Spotify, and all else. We have 50% use online radio, and 39% listen to podcast. Online radio might be AM or FM. I remember there was a time that my favorite radio station closed, and I had to scamper in the internet to find where it went. So 50% still listen to the radio. Okay, next slide, please. So Blueprint.PH, we monitor Facebook trends every day. We get the top 50 Facebook trends, trending keywords. These are keywords. And then we aggregate them monthly through their engagements. So I'm going to present to you from mid-January to June of this year, and it's going to be very quick. Okay, so here are the top topics that Filipinos want to talk about. And we are talking about 66 million data points here. Later, we change data points to engagement score, and I will explain. So here, data points meaning we add comments, shares, and reactions. All right, so what are the topics that Filipinos like talking about in Facebook? So we are talking about like 70 million Facebook users in the Philippines. So first is faith. Second is Korean wave or Korean entertainment. This is very high. And because also when it comes to creative industry, probably Korea has paved the way, or they are some form of a standard or benchmark. Third is sports and esports. So during the earlier, in January for this year, the top 3 topics in Facebook that Filipinos like to talk about from publicly available data. So I would like to emphasize again that these are from publicly available pages. Our faith, K-pop, Korean entertainment, and sports and esports. So here we put together sports and e-gaming. And then fourth is COVID-19. And then we have local news, local entertainment, social media things, some influencers, inspiration, brands, movies, and anime. So looking at this, a certain portion, 7 out of 12, relates to the entertainment industry. And then go to the next slide, please. This is February, a total of 128 million data points. Okay, so it's all the same, no? But we could see here that really in relation to entertainment, we have Korean wave, local entertainment, local news. I'll put it local news as part of entertainment because their platforms are from the entertainment industry. We have brands for advertising and OPM. You have to take note that for OPM, it is only driven by one keyword, and we will talk about it later. So given this data, these are the things that Filipinos would like to talk about in the month of February during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19, there is just a lone keyword. Unlike in faith, we have several. Korean Wave, we have several. We just aggregate them into a category. But for COVID-19, it's just COVID-19. So it's still high. For here, international news, something to do with Myanmar. So Filipino Facebook users were also concerned about it. Okay, next slide. For March, it's the same. And then local entertainment, OPM, local news, brands, Korean Wave. They are all there. Next again. The same thing. This was April. So we could really say that demand for content when it comes to OPM, news and entertainment, esports, Korean Wave. And here in April, we have pageants. So pageants is not only a beauty contest, but it's also a display of the arts when it comes to fashion and makeup and all these things. So when we see here, mostly, how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10 is related to entertainment. So that is the level of interest the Filipinos have when it comes to the entertainment industry. Next slide. For May, this is what is amazing. Somehow it changed. Korean Wave was #1, followed by Faith, probably because April and March was Holy Week. So really people were expressing a lot of interactions when it comes to their faith. Pageants was #3. This is when Miss Universe happened. So that is how fascinated Filipinos are in Miss Universe. It is #3 out of the 10, which was not there in January and February. Esports, this is massive. This is big. The data coming from esports most probably are from the digital natives or those from 35 years old and below. This is basically Mobile Legends gaming, and for the competitions that it really has big impact and numbers when it comes to data. COVID-19 was on the 5th because interest was shifting, and at the same time, probably people are learning to live with COVID-19. And then local entertainment, social media, OPM, local news, and brands. So it's all the same. These are just changes in number. And the last one for June. Next slide. Okay. For June, it's still the same. Korean Wave, Faith, esports, COVID-19, brands, local news, local entertainment, OPM, social media, and sports. Okay, let's one by one. 71 million engagement score. So engagement, before we took data points, but we changed it to engagement score. It's comments and plus reactions times 10% plus shares. We gave more value with shares because it is what is driving the interactions in Facebook. The 71.2 million engagement score for Filipinos under Korean Wave is basically K-pop. So that is how big the industry is in the country and the demand for what it has. May was for June, for K-pop, it was the time of comeback. So the biggest artists have their new singles and new comebacks, they call it like that, and it's 71 million. For us in the Philippines, it's esports and local entertainment. And OPM. So let's talk about OPM. Let's go there. This is the first time we put OPM for the we disaggregated OPM top 10. And as I've said a while ago, only OPM is driven by only one keyword, which is SB19. So the 3.4 million engagement score is only driven by one band, one boy group, who puts on more effort in YouTube and in their fandoms. So that is one thing that we will discuss later on when we go to digital platforms. That is where the demand is coming from, and that is where players can come in, and that is where policy can be able to move forward. And that is also one vortex in our society, which new things will come in. Okay, next slide. So in summary, okay, so here in June, the summary is 71 million for Korean Wave, 4 million for local TV shows, 9 million for esports, 3 million for OPM, 5 million for brands, and 5 million for local news. So this is the only from Facebook data. This is the scheme of things that we're looking into. And given this number of audience that we could that we could proxy, we could say that we have a lot of demand, and at the same time we have to provide more supply when it comes to entertainment and arts. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's a disaggregated data. So as you can see here, BTS has 8.1 million, followed by Blackpink at 936. This is from the Filipino Facebook users. So when it comes to content creation, BTS really had aside from their music and their dancing content, and fan engagement is also one of the assets that they have uniquely. Though K-pop culture has very, very strong fan engagement relationships, and that brought about more content. So that is the profile for the K-pop battle. It's really, really, really high. And so for the next one, next slide. Okay, so here is for the OPM. Again, SB19 is also number one for almost 500,000, more than 500,000 engagement score. Next is Ben and Ben, as these are young artists who recently collaborated together and had very good YouTube results. And then here's the other things. Kustakli, he's not associated with any network. SB19 and Ben are not also associated with any network, but they are there. The top four are not associated with any traditional entertainment network. But they are, their platforms basically are the social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and all those interactions. Lea Salonga also has a very strong online presence. And okay, Moira also has a strong online presence. Eli Buendia with his latest issue on that they are not friends with his bandmates. And BGYO here is another boy group produced by ABS-CBN, which is number 5. And at number 10 is X Battalion. These are hip-hop collectives, which has been in the industry for a very long time, but they are not associated with any traditional corporate entertainment networks on TV, but they are strong online. Okay, next slide. So for the brands, these are what is very strong online for the brands. It's Lazada, number 1. Take note also that Lazada has, what do you call this? Collaborated with SB19, with Miss Universe, and another influencers. And they have very, very strong online presence, obviously, because their platform is basically online. They are number 1. Shopee is number 7. We also have their gadgets, Realme and Vivo, Watson's, Walter Mart, Yamaha for motorcycle, Avon, Dunkin' Donuts, and Final Leatherware. Next slide. This was from May. Okay. The actors also have demands. The number 1 is Daniel Padilla. When we released this, our Twitter sphere, we have very low engagement in Twitter because we release research data. But when we put local actors there, our engagement increased significantly. The same with OPM. Every time we release OPM and SB19 is there, the engagement becomes high. So we have to take note also that there is demand when it comes to their fandoms, and there will be also another, that's also another thing to look into when it comes to demand in local entertainment industry. So we have Daniel Padilla here to Alden Richards. So the new ones are not yet here in April. I think for the next data, we haven't written about it yet. The new actors are there because there are new shows produced mainly for the online platforms. Okay, next slide. Okay, the actors are more traditional. Here we could find here the younger ones. Julian Ward and Andrea Brillantes have high engagement scores. At this, they are very much driven by their fans online. Angel Locsin also has a very strong online presence. Jessie Manjola is there because of her wedding. Tony Gonzaga also has a podcast in YouTube and it's doing very well. And all else are brought about by the issues being are the stories about them, like Julia Barreto and Ellen Adarna. Kim Chiu also has a strong online presence. So all the but last Sunday I was watching ASAP, and then they said that they are really developing their online platforms for more fan engagement, and also to create more inputs and creative outputs for our Filipino audiences to watch. So we have no other choice but to go through this, because even the artists are creating their own digital platforms. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is for TV from April 1 to 30. This is surprising because Wawawin is #1 in Facebook, but when we do the traditional surveys, I don't think that they'll be there. But however, Wawawin uses Facebook very much to where they could get the raffle. When you comment there, you could win something, or they would call you. So they use Facebook for that. Kapamilya mo, Jessica, Kapuso, I'm sorry. Kapuso mo, Jessica, so is #2. It has been consistently #1. When we go this aggregated data for which one has the top engagement score for the month, usually it's Kapuso mo, Jessica, so for their human interest stories. And then first Yaya, he's into her. This is quite good because he's into her when we did this data is not yet shown. It's trending because they are just introducing it through their ads, and it had good engagement. Rafi Tulfo has also high engagement. We know that he has a lot of followers because of his of the stories that he presents in his show. Showtime, ASAP are there. It's significant. ASAP is only there weekly, but their online presence is very high every Sunday. And then there's this Babawin ko ang lahat, the prenup, which is shown in Netflix and Frontline Filipinas. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when the pandemic started, the entertainment industry find its way out how to pivot. And some of the significant things that I could recall are online concerts and musicals, which also trended in social media, like Ang Huling El Bimbo. The first online gig that I have seen was with Evidencel, which had, I think it has 8,000 views. In the beginning, I think that was June or April, 8,000 views for an online concert was high. And then, of course, and then it was mentioned a while ago that online movies and or online streaming movies increased when it comes to subscription. YouTube also has its online movie, some channels, some local production channels have streamed their movies there. Because in YouTube, you could do premium or not premium. With premium, there will be ads, but they put it there anyway. I want iFlix and subscription for Netflix. We have Upstream and KITX and Viva Max. This is Viva Max, not Viva Max. Whereas our corporate entertainment companies are pivoting also online. And the Metro Manila Film Fest was held in the cloud for this year. At SB19, SB19 was nominated as a social artist for Billboard, competing with the biggest artists as like Blackpink, BTS, 17, and Ariana Grande. This wouldn't happen if Filipinos are not active in Facebook and the fandom isn't that active. So it was able to, so Billboard was able to put them in the social artist category. And I think they got number if I'm not mistaken, number 4 out of the 5 or 3. And then there is also the trend in advertising and entertainment collaboration, like with Lazada, McDonald's, and Shopee. Advertising pivoted also itself from as a content creator and more active online presence with the artists like SB19 for Lazada and BTS for McDonald's, and I think Monster X for Shopee. And they have concerts there every now and then for the users to use. Okay, next slide. So we are using digital platforms, and to be able to get those numbers, they are large, and we do big data analytics, and thankfully for our tool, we are able to gather and synthesize the numbers for like 2 petabytes or 2 million data points. And that is where we could see if there is demand for the entertainment industry. So the pivoting to digital platforms can change how we work, socialize, and also create economic values because it reduces costs and barriers. And it also opens up new models, which opens up for new opportunities. And this is where FDI will be most useful. I've been reading about FDI, and there have been demand for it to be opened up since 2003. So sometimes when crisis happens, other countries, when crisis happen, they are really forced to think innovatively and adapt with no matter how difficult adoption is, because that is the only way to be able to recover. And then as the pandemic accelerated digital transformation, probably it is also time that we open up our economy, specifically in the provisions for entertainment, education, advertising, and media. I included their education because when we move forward, as I mentioned before, there will be structural changes, and probably one of them is also on the part of the content and of education and the upskilling that we need to go forward to. Okay, next slide. Okay, so when it comes to this topic, so these are the emerging trends that was highlighted during this pandemic. So the independent art production. If you are an active social media user, if you are a member of a big fandom, if you are interested in new things, you can see that talents or people are creating their own art. There are volumes and volumes of alternate universe stories out there, volumes of visual arts, a lot of music being composed, but there is no platform for them to monetize it. If there is, it's minimal, it's foreign, it's not local. If it's local, their clients would tell them just to give them for free, so they'll have a portfolio. So that kind of trend. Don't change the slide. Go back, please. Okay. So at the same time, also the emerging trend is advertisers now are also content creators. There's also niche advertising, like for example, gaming. Gaming has a niche. It's not for everyone. K-pop has a niche. Local entertainment has a niche. So advertising will have to pivot also itself and adapt to these new things that are coming. The social impact of fandoms. Let me emphasize this because in the beginning, there is high social impact. And connected with niche advertising and independent productions, there is this certain group of collectives that are creating social impact, not being measured right now because it's very, very, very new. But I can see in 3 to 5 years' time, this will become part of the research topics for thesis and eventually for the industries to need to look into. And lastly, the emerging trend of representation. If we're going to do FDIs, if we have, and then we'll continue to go global, the trend for Filipino representation has to move forward. So this is one of the more important things. If we are going to welcome new players, if we're going to be able to have more investments when it comes to this industry, and given the demand that I have presented a while ago, the interest level of Filipinos and sentiments of Filipinos when it comes to entertainment. And if we go global, there should be representation. Aside from that, we also have Filipino talents as suppliers of this of the entertainment and advertising industries. Okay, next slide. Okay, so again, just to reiterate, why we need more players. Okay, so because we have a rise of new talents. Again, I mentioned there are volumes and volumes of publications online where these kids or adults alike write and put it there. There are also volumes of music, volumes of artworks that's there. It's just there in the cloud. So we need a lot of players to be able to get these talents and be able to monetize and put it in the industry and be able to take this as our advantage because talent is there. And also representation is there. In Disney, in all those established media industries, Filipinos are there, but as I have seen in one of the documentaries, why is there not much representation, though talent, Filipino talent, when it comes to production is there already. Secondly, why we need more players is the upskilling of talents. There are many jobs that will be really left behind after the pandemic. And also more IT jobs will be needed as we move forward to cater to the digital transformation that is happening, and also to cater to the digital audience that is there. The 30-year-olds now cannot imagine a life without the internet or without gadgets. So the educational system also has to adapt and be able to get more talent of skilling of Industry 4.0 knowledge and skills. And that would need also another set of investments because training is not cheap. Okay, so that is also the fourth bullet. And the fifth bullet is why we need more business players. So the trends for freelancing in the entertainment industry is there. So if we have more investors, if there is more competition, if we open up the economy for bigger, more established investments that will cater to the entertainment industry, there will be more labor protection or social protection for the workers. And many of them would have to leave, especially if we were able to upskill and then be able to supply the demand of the global demand for entertainment. And we will be able to pull out the talents that we have, may it be on screen, off screen, or production wise. And so that the more important thing is our citizens will be protected, paid well, with social protection, and they'll be able to enjoy the fruits of their labor. So from the usual informal creative sector, where many of them are being asked to give their services for free, if we have more players and more investments, the informal creative sector will be a formalized sector who will pay taxes, who will contribute more to the development of the country for progress, and be able to help out and make use of this industry as one of the pillars of the next generation of Filipinos. Okay, next. Okay. All right. In conclusion, these are some things to look into while we develop these things for entertainment. Is we need to encourage policies for fair competition, especially if we open up the economies, and then full support for micro businesses, or also probably businesses that will support micro businesses. When we open up for the entertainment industry, which has been a frustration in the local scenario, is labor security and protection. And then, of course, it has been emphasized several times in this fora that for data access, privacy and security, also look into taxation for the entertainment industry. If we would need to have incentives or or exemptions, something like that. And then, of course, the legislation for data privacy, consumer protection, and cybersecurity. And some of the more underlying issues that we have to put into is inclusivity, because there's still a large segment of the population being left behind. So along this is to improve our digital infrastructure and also address the digital readiness gap. There is a very big digital readiness gap, most especially when they close the educational system and most will go online, but not everyone could afford it. So imagine the gap that there will be there, and then we all have this digital transformation things happening, but there is this certain sector of the society which is not a part of that. So that is something that we need to look into socially, and of course, the increasing the more cooperation regionally and globally. So for us to be able to have more opportunities for investors. So by reference for these things to look at is the Asian Regional Integration Report. This is basically what I looked into when it comes to what you call this foreign direct investments. Okay, I think that's it. Next slide, please. All right. So I hope you had some takeaways and have some numbers that will rationalize why we need to open up the economy and the demand for Filipino audiences, that we need more supply, more content, and we have more potential to be able to develop our entertainment and arts industry and make this one of the pillars of our next generation economy, especially in the creative economy scenario. All right, so that's it, and I hope you had some takeaways, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Miss Ella Kristina Domingo, for that very informative presentation. So before we proceed to our next speaker, let us have our poll question. So I hope everyone can participate. So the poll question is, do you agree that creative industries are good economic asset and can bring economic benefits to the country? Okay, so I hope our participants will participate in our poll question. Okay, so while our participants are voting, so I hope we would like to remind everyone that you may send your questions through the chat box and the Q&A tab, and we will try to take as much as possible in the open forum. Okay, so now let us, okay. So votes are still coming in. So I hope everyone can participate and vote in our poll question. So do you agree that creative industries are good economic asset and can bring economic benefits to the country? So the results are 159 of our participants, or 97%, voted yes, while 5 of them, or the only 3%, voted no. Okay, so thank you for participating in our quick poll. So let us proceed to our next speaker. Our next speaker is a private business consultant, author, and public speaker residing in Manila. He is senior advisor for the Arangkada Philippines project at the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, chairman of its legislative committee, and senior counselor of Rains and Partner Limited of Singapore. He is the author of Arangkada Philippines 2010 and two AmCham roadmaps to more foreign investments in the Philippines. The American Enterprise Institute published his monograph, Jamaica, Managing Political and Economic Change in a Third World Democracy. Educated at Georgetown, Princeton, and Harvard University, he served as an American diplomat for 25 years, beginning in Vietnam and the Philippines. He also worked in the Bureau of East Asia and Pacific Affairs, the Bureau of Congressional Affairs, the policy planning staff in the U.S. Congress, as a special assistant to the Undersecretary of Political Affairs and political counselor in Kingston, Jamaica. Let us all welcome Mr. John Forbes. Sir, good morning.
All right, thank you. I unmuted myself. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you clearly.
Great. Well, it's a real privilege to be invited to participate in this activity of the Undersecretary Jonathan Malaya at DILG. And I see you have almost 300 participants. And I want to say hello to all my LGU friends around the country. One thing I've really missed during this lockdown for the last 2 years is traveling more in the Philippines. I've been from Moscow to Tawi-Tawi in the past, and I always get excited when I see the change that's happening throughout the country. I'm expanding the topic I want to talk about today to include mass media and advertising in addition to mass media. Let me first recognize my good friend, Dr. Bernie Villegas and Secretary Martin, and say hello again to Ella Domingo with Blueprint. It's been quite a while, and I really appreciated your presentation. I also thank you and want to remember my very good friend and fellow at the Foundation for Economic Freedom, Gary Oliver, former Secretary Gary Oliver, who I've advocated many of these reforms in FDI, the restrictions in the Constitution, in the Congress and elsewhere. We really do miss Gary. So I will go through about 40 slides, so I'm going to try to do it as fast as I can. Let me explain a little background here. The Arrancada Philippines, Arrancada, of course, being a word that means to accelerate in Filipino, inspired a massive book of 470 pages published in late 2010, but centered around what we regarded as the 7 big winner sectors: agribusiness, business processing, creative industries, infrastructure, manufacturing, mining, and tourism, which are represented symbolically on the left. And this was published and co-sponsored by the 7 members of the Joint Foreign Chambers, whose logos are shown on the right. Next slide, please. We have also published 13 policy briefs, one of which is on creative industries. It's the one in yellow in the second row, which has the light bulb. And these are available, all of this is available on our website, www.arrancadaphilippines.com. Next slide, please. Arrancada supports improved Philippine competitiveness, resulting in faster economic growth, more investment, more jobs, reduced poverty, partially through liberalizing restrictions on FDI. And we have welcomed efforts over the last 2 decades to do exactly that. In the Estrada administration, there was Concord, the Constitutional Correction for Development, in 2000. In the Macapagal-Arroyo administration, there was a consultative commission in 2005. Both of these efforts produced recommendations to remove many of the constitutional restrictions, but they were only recommendations, similar to the federalism initiative of the current administration. Speaker Belmonte, Sonny Belmonte, had a resolution that went to second reading in the 16th Congress, which is identical to the RBH2 that we're talking about, you've been talking about in this series of 5 webinars at DLIG. We support all of these because they will open up the economy to more FDI. And in the region of Southeast Asia, there is more FDI been coming in recent years than in all of China. So it's there. Not enough is coming to the Philippines. Next slide. I'm sure you previously studied these, what the restrictions are. I would just single out today, I want to talk about Article 16, Section 11, Paragraph 1 on mass media, and the subsequent paragraph on advertising. Now, what are they? Next slide, please. Well, or why? And I should make a distinction, because the RBH2, the Belmonte resolution, and the decision of the House of Representatives is only to put language in for Congress to change it in the future. And that changes something in the future, but not today. So if this were approved in the Senate and it went to a plebiscite, presumably in the May 2022 elections, the people would approve having the Congress make the change in the future. Both Secretary Olivar and myself, in our representations to the Philippine Congress, have always recommended the immediate repeal, because that has immediate effect, and the Congress has the power to pass a law anytime it wishes. So that's a different approach than is currently being, but if that approach to immediate repeal is not accepted and is not put before the people, then the second best is to have the Congress. We hope the Congress does it quickly under the next administration. I think these points have been made before, but globally, equity restrictions are in laws, not in constitutions. The Philippines is quite unique in this respect, and it's one of the most restrictive countries in the world. Although let's not assume that the Philippines is completely closed to FDI. It certainly is not. It's just that it is more closed than its competing economies, and the competing economies get more FDI. These restrictions go back 40 or 50 years, and they're outdated. It's not, they go back to when the Philippines was more of an inward-looking economy with a much smaller population. But today, the latest statistics, as Ella just pointed out, are 109 million Filipinos. And ASEAN is not a backward region. It's one of the fastest growing, dynamic regions in the world. And therefore, the Philippines, with more people and continued poverty, needs FDI more than ever before. These restrictions, when they're removed, will increase competitiveness, lead to more FDI, and create more direct and indirect jobs. One of the things that is not discussed often is that new free trade agreements, such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is currently called the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, of which the US regrettably is not a member, but maybe in the future, requires all the members of the treaty to have open cross-border investment regimes. So it's not to have restrictions on foreign investment, it's to be open so that Filipinos can openly invest in all the member countries, and those member countries can openly invest in the Philippines. And I'm happy to note that the DTI has expressed interest to the Secretariat of the CPTPP in New Zealand in applying to join that particular treaty, now that it's seeking to ratify the RCEP, another large FTA agreement. Now, next slide. We'll talk about mass media. What exactly are we talking about? Next slide. I want to go back in history to the first newspaper in 1811, which actually established with the Spanish Governor General as the editor. And during the American regime, after 1898, a number of American business people established newspapers, some of which are under current Filipino ownership, such as they've survived, Manila Times, the Daily Bulletin. These are over a century old. I have a picture here of a magazine that shows the Cordillera. That's a picture of pine trees in Baguio, published by an American entrepreneur by the name of Bill Hartendorp in the late 20s and 1930s. And you could subscribe for this for 20 centavos a copy or 2 pesos a year. So that was the situation before World War II. Next slide. After World War II, of course, during the occupation of the Japanese, everything was censored and controlled by the occupation government. But right after the war, up until 72, the Philippine press became the freest and most interesting in all of Asia. But it was shut down. I was here at the time. I remember it very clearly. The first order of President Marcos was to take over and control all privately owned newspapers, magazines, radio, and television, and all other media communications. Next slide, please. Now, radio doesn't go back to 1811, goes back to 1922. The American businessman who was selling electrical devices opened 3 small radio stations to inform people of his products. And 2 years later, the 2 first commercial radio stations, KZKZ and KZRQ, both owned, I believe these were American entrepreneurs, I'm not entirely sure, but they opened up. So we had print media and then radio broadcasting. Then we had television. In this audience today, I expect most of you were born after 1953. But I remember, I was living in Kansas at the time, this kind of a TV set, and our first TV set that my family had. In the Philippines, DZAQ TV Channel 3 was established by no less than the brother of Eldepido Carino, who intended to run for re-election the president. And we all remember that there was only one TV station. Well, there's an American Armed Forces TV station broadcasting out of Clark and back for decades. You'd see all these antennas that on the rooftops that would point north to Pampanga. The local TV station that I just noted here was acquired by the Chronicle Broadcasting Network, and it was the birth of ABS-CBN back in the early 50s. So television is still with us. I think it's useful to look at a timeline of what I've just been saying, because the past goes back to the print media, radio, television, and the real seminal event here began in 1983 with birth of the internet. Cable television came in '69. Internet came to the Philippines in 1994. Facebook, social media, 2005, and Netflix streaming 2016. So it's very, very different, this period that's after, it begins in cable TV and the internet and the previous times. Now, let's look at the constitutional restrictions. But first, Dr. Bernie Villegas is with us today. He's a very good friend. He's been, CRC has been a co-sponsor of this series. Thank you, CRC. And I want to quote a comment, because Dr. Villegas was a member of the 1986 CONCOM. But this quote pertains to the effect of what is in the Constitution today. And preventing foreign ownership of media can be counterproductive in the digital age, because media, telecom, and information technology are merging into a single super industry. And if the Philippines cannot attract foreign capital, and with it foreign technology into this integrated industry, we will be left behind in the Industrial Revolution 4.0. And if you're left behind in that Industrial Revolution, it's more difficult to achieve the goal of Meta of Ambition Natin by the year 2040, which is to become a much higher income country. Next slide, please. In 1973, the Constitution of 1935 was being rewritten, in part because the 1935 Constitution was an act of the American Congress. In that sense, it was it was quite a colonial law, and the feeling when a constitutional convention was elected in 1970 was that the Philippine Republic, established in 1946, should be writing a new constitution. And they did. And for the first time, they added this language, Article 15, Section 7, that the ownership and management of mass media shall be limited to citizens of the Philippines or corporations or associations wholly owned by such citizens. So that's the origin of the current restriction. It did not exist in previous constitutions. After the Izza revolution, President Aquino named 50 commissioners, one of which was Dr. Villegas, to write a new constitution, the current constitution. And Article 16, Section 11, almost word for word, repeats the language in the 1973 Constitution. It adds cooperatives. Otherwise, it's still 100% wholly owned by citizens and corporations, cooperatives, associations of the Philippines. All right. Now, there are many laws that define mass media and regulations, et cetera. I'm going to show them, but not spend all the time in discussing them, but you will have them in the slides, starting with the next slide, which goes from the Constitution to the laws. Well, first of all, let me explain in this slide what was the prevailing attitude at the time in 1973 and even in 1987. Former Secretary Gary Tevis, who was a delegate in that Constitutional Convention, he's one of the 41 of the over 300 that are still surviving, shared his comment the other day with me that the prevailing thinking at the time was for Filipinos to control and manage the resources of the country. Having been ruled for centuries by foreigners, the slogan Filipino First resonated with many delegates and policy makers. And Dr. Villegas shared this comment about 1986. The prohibition of foreign ownership in media was part of the Philippine First mentality. So the same mentality that there was 15 years ago, before, in the early 1970s. That prevailed among members of the Constitutional Commission. It was that strategic industries should be controlled by Filipinos. Education and mass media were singled out for zero foreign ownership because the thinking, erroneous, I pointed out then, was that foreigners may subvert national interest if they were allowed to own, even partially, businesses involved in education or media. There is even talk of foreigners spying through media. So that was the environment when these restrictions were put into the Constitution in 1973 and 1987. And a comment from a prominent advertising executive who shared with me, characterized it as Filipino exclusive ownership for broadcast media is mainly motivated by old Marcos paradigm political ideas where the minds of the masses must be protected through responsible use of mass media. I guess the idea is that if foreigners own even 1% of local broadcasting, then foreign ideas, propaganda can be poison the minds of the masses. Well, I think if we all what Ella Dominga has just showed us was unimaginable in the group that Dr. Villegas belonged to in 1986-87, let alone in the group of over 300 that wrote the 1973 Constitution. Times are different. Next slide, please. They're very different. So let's quickly see what mass media comprises. As I said, this is rather repetitive, but in 1976, a Marcos presidential directive, 1018, and the PDs of Marcos have the force of law. They are recognized the same as the Commonwealth Act or Republic Act, or even the executive orders of President Aquino during the Revolutionary 1 year before the 87 Constitution went into effect. They all are part of the laws of the Philippines. So the term mass media refers to the print media of communication, which includes all newspapers, periodicals, magazines, journals, and publications, and all advertising therein, and billboards, neon signs, and the like, and the broadcast medium of communication, which includes radio and television broadcasting in all their aspects, and all other cinematographic or radio promotions and advertising. Now, this is 1976. We're now almost 50 years after that. There are other opinions here that will continue all the way up until 2021 by the Department of Justice in 86, the Consumer Act of the Philippines in 92, another Department of Justice opinion in 98, a law on tobacco regulation, which adds, now let's go back to the RA 92. They add electronic media such as, but not limited to, the internet. So here, this is in 2003. So they're starting to recognize that electronic media should also be, is part of mass media. More recently, there are opinions of the SEC that continue to, they're contradictory only on internet. Now they're starting to look at internet. They're not quite sure whether internet should be 100% Filipino or not. But very recently, just earlier this year, SEC again defined mass media in the same, much the same way as before: print, radio, television, film, movies, wire, radio communications, and anything that disseminates information and ideas to the public. And the citizen requirement is intended to prevent the use of such facility by aliens to influence public opinion to the detriment of the best interests of the nation. This is the Philippine Security and Exchange Commission speaking this year. Now, I don't know, I think Ella Dominga and Blueprint should go brief them on what Filipinos are watching. I don't know whether there are certainly many alien influences there, not all by any means, but when K-pop is so popular, is that alien or not? Is it influencing public opinion or not? Is it to the detriment of the best interest of the nation? Well, I'm not the person to answer that. You are. And I think you just answered it in your poll. Next slide, please. So we have the restrictions versus the reality. That's already come out in the previous presentations. And in my opinion, in the opinion of the foreign chambers, and the opinion of many people, the restrictions are anachronistic. Certainly in the opinion of the DILG, because you are supporting changing the restrictions through Congress eventually, but changing them. What's happened since these were originally written by Secretary Teves and Dr. Villegas and their colleagues, and ratified by the people in 73 and 87. Although the ratification in 73 was mostly a show of hands. It was an overwhelming yes vote for the Constitution during martial law. It was more democratic in 87. But cable TV has happened, digital media, internet, satellite broadcast, smartphones and 5G, streaming apps. These things didn't exist when the constitutions were ratified. and yet they're very much part of our daily life. So restrictions versus reality. Restrictions are anachronistic. Next slide, please. The other very odd thing is that the restrictions apply to ownership and management, but not to content. So today, in 2021, the biggest media platform is in the Philippines is none other than Facebook, which is digital. It's media, but it's digital, and it's 100% foreign owned. The previous biggest, before the franchise was not extended, is ABS-CBN through more traditional TV and radio broadcasting. So the restrictions control ownership and management, but not content, because everybody's on Facebook and other digital media. Next slide, please. I mentioned other digital media. I'm not quite like Ella and many of you in the audience, so tuned in. I don't do TikTok, I do watch YouTube. I don't know what VIU is. I don't watch Apple TV. I do subscribe to Spotify for music, and I watch a lot of Netflix, but you also have HBO Go, Amazon Prime Video, and even Pornhub. All of these are foreign owned, and yet they're not restricted. So you've got this contradiction between restricting ownership and management and content. Next slide, please. So what today justifies these continued restrictions? Is the logic behind the restrictions to prevent foreign content ideas from pervading Philippine airways? Well, that's not happening, said a senior executive to me recently. Why are we holding on to very outdated ownership laws for advertising and broadcast media, while at the same time there are no relevant regulations for digital media? That's a very good question. Perhaps the only reason today is to protect oligopolistic business interests. Perhaps. Next slide, please. Now, I don't want to turn to advertising because it has not been discussed really as an industry. Although what Ella Dominguez shared is very much what the advertising agencies analyze continuously. Could I have the next slide, please? The rationale, according to a prominent Philippine advertising executive, for this restriction is that the sector should be linked to its companion restriction on media that were together intended to limit the influence of foreign media and advertisers on the country's citizenship. To limit the influence, you say 100% Filipino, but as I just showed, it has not limited the influence at all. It's limited the ownership. Next slide, please. So in the 1973 Constitution, the limitation is not there. In the 1987 Constitution, it was added, and it simply says, there are two sentences, that the advertising industry is impressed with public interest and shall be regulated by law for the protection of consumers and the promotion of the general welfare. And only Philippine citizens or corporations, or at least 70% of the capital owned by such citizens, shall be allowed to engage in the industry. So since approximately May of 1987, what was previously allowed was 100% foreign ownership of advertising agencies has been 70% Filipino owned. That's quite a difference from what happened before. Next slide, please. And we have definitions in 1992 law, the Consumer Act, with respect to consumers, that advertising is conceptualizing, presenting, or making available to the public through any form of mass media, fact, data, or information about the attributes, quality, availability of consumer products, services, or credit. So it's very broad, and I think we all know what advertising is. Next slide. Let's talk about the nature of this sector in the Philippines and the region. It's a very fast-growing industry in Asia. We are living in the fastest-growing region in the world, not during the pandemic, but before and hopefully after the pandemic. And advertising over the last several years, is growing at 40%, but much slower in the Philippines. If the regional Asia Pacific growth rate is 40%, in the Philippines, it's only growing at 10%. And that suggests that the growth would be much higher in the Philippines if the Philippine industry was not focused domestically, but had better access to the regional and global market. Now, globally, advertising industry is $1 trillion a year, and in Asia, it's $250 billion, $250 billion per year. But in the Philippines, it's very small, only about $2 billion US, less than 1% of the total in Asia, and employs only 3,000 persons. That's tiny. The industry association has 60 members. Now, 17 of those 60 have country tie-ups with major multinational firms. But those firms are not allowed to own more than 30%. But in other Asian countries, they own up to 100%. Next slide, please. This industry is also significantly changing since the restriction was put into place in '87. There are many specialized activities in the industry. And I would strongly say that if you remove this restriction so that you allow 100% foreign investment, that will create opportunities for the Philippines to become regional hubs. The regional hubs for major advertising industries would locate in the Philippines to take advantage of the creative talent of Filipinos. That's what we want. We want foreign investment to help the creative talents of Filipinos to improve the quality of the advertising industry within the Philippines and take advantage of the regional and even global market. This would promote the reputation of the Philippines for creativity and support potential new foreign investment in other creative industries, such as animation, design, filmmaking, music, software, video games, virtual reality, together with the Philippine Creative Industry Act being discussed in the Congress. Why deny foreign ownership to major, they're not going to gobble up, they're not, other countries allow Malaysia 100%, Singapore 31%, Thailand 35%, Cambodia 100%, Canada 73%, Chile 100%, Japan, Mexico. There are restrictions in other countries, but there are also ones that the United States 63%. But Indonesia, I think, has gone up to 100%. They passed a massive bill that opened up the economy last year. Next slide. This I referred to earlier, and I think it's very important for people to understand. This is 84 countries out of, there are over 200 countries in the world, but OECD is based in Paris. So these are the larger economies that they rate this every year. The yellow, the first yellow you'll see moving from the left is Singapore, which is more open than the purple bar is the average of the 84 countries. The red bar to the far right is the Philippines. So this is not a reputation that we particularly want to have in the Philippines. The red bar means closed. The ASEAN average is to the left. And Vietnam, which has now overtaken the Philippines in per capita income, which is exporting 5 times what the Philippines is exporting in goods annually, and is the 6th largest exporter to the United States. The Philippines is only the 31st, is the yellow bar, much closer to the center. What we'd like to see is the Philippines move towards that yellow bar where Vietnam is, or even closer to Singapore, which is what the advocacy that we're talking about today can achieve. I think I'm at the end of my slides. I have one final statement that economic policies should be adjusted consistent with the changing conditions in the country. Economic theory must be consistent with facts and realities. In fact, I would work hard for the outright removal of those restrictive economic provisions and allow future Congresses or parliaments to impose limitations, regulations, or even reimpose the restrictions should circumstances or conditions warrant those adjustments, just like what most countries in the world and our ASEAN peers have done through ordinary legislation and not via the Constitution. And this, I believe, comes from former Secretary Teves reflecting on how it is different today than it was when he was a young economist and a delegate to the Constitutional Convention in the early 1970s, almost 50 years ago. In fact, exactly 50 years ago. They're about to, they're actually, the surviving delegates are publishing a 50-year later book this year. So an increasing percentage of the Philippine population gets their advertising, entertainment, news over the internet, with almost no restrictions on source or content or ownership, making the restriction anachronistic, protectionist, and a barrier to investment in creative and other industries. Next and last slide. This shows a closed door. It says foreign ownership is not allowed. And that's the case for media and advertising, where only 30%, and most companies will not invest if they only own 30%. And the concept is you have foreign investors lining up to go through open doors in other countries, but not in the Philippines for these restrictions. But there are foreign investors coming into, don't get the idea that the country is completely closed. We're not talking about investing in manufacturing or BPO services or tourism. There are restrictions on media. We're talking about that and on advertising today. And with that, I conclude my remarks and I thank Undersecretary Malaya and others. My colleagues have put this up. This was not in my original deck. This is to announce that AmCham is launching, the American Chamber is launching a new creative industries committee on August 3. It's free to everyone at 9 o'clock in the morning, with the founder and president of the Industry Association, the Creative Economy Council of the Philippines, Mr. Paulo Mercado. If you have time, please join us, register, and we'll see you again on August 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes, for that very informative presentation. presentation. And thank you very much to our speakers for your knowledge and insights on our topic. And so now I know our participants here in the Zoom room, as well as those watching via Facebook Live, are excited to raise their questions. And so let us begin the open forum. I'd like to encourage everyone to post your questions in the chat box, and we will take note of those questions and try to raise as much to our panel of our speakers. To those of you who are joining us via Facebook Live, do post your questions in the comments and we will try to get as many of them as we can within the allotted time. So I notice we have friends from the media here with us. Should you want to ask questions, kindly press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and our secretariat will coordinate with you to have your mic turned on so we can recognize you. Now, for our first question, this is addressed to the first presenter, Miss Domingo. So this is from Rockford Maunes. All of this data analytics provided what consumes the daily economic value of every Filipino and their availability and social media. So my question is, would a better internet providers, much more competitors in the internet industry, surpass the number of Filipinos building platforms, blogs, and etc.? If ever, the availability of internet connection will also yield affordability and no expiration dates on their prepaid internet mobile subscription.
I
So
have a short answer to that. In my presentation, I also emphasized there the digital readiness or the digital readiness gap. And the only way to be able to resolve the digital readiness gap is to improve the infrastructure, the internet infrastructure, which we discussed during the last forum. Did that answer my question? The question?
yes, ma'am. Okay, so maybe our other panelists can also answer or add to the answer of Miss Domingo. Okay, maybe Dr. Villegas po can add po to the answer of Miss Domingo regarding the question of one of our participants. Would a better internet providers, much more competitors in the internet industry, surpass the number of Filipino building platforms, blogs, and etc.? And if ever, the availability of internet connection will also yield affordability and no expiration dates on their internet mobile subscription.
Thank you very much. The question is very relevant to what I said about these three sectors: telecom, media, and information technology, really merging into one super industry. You cannot have better internet connections if we don't also remove the restrictions against investment in the telecom industry. And I would relate that to what John mentioned about Filipino first policy. Really, and I already mentioned that during our discussion in 1986, being equivalent to protecting oligopolistic interests. You know, we cannot limit participation only to Filipinos in very capital intensive industries like telecom. And Filipino first to be equivalent to Filipinos who are rich Filipinos first, and never mind the rest of us. And it's actually happening now, but it has to really be done in the Constitution. I'm not in favor of just passing a legislation on public services. It has to go to the root. We have to open up the telecom industry so that the internet connections will improve, because internet connections have a lot to do with also opening media. So I think that's a very, very important issue.
Thank you very much for answering the question, Dr. Villegas. And also, thank you, Ms. Domingo. So for the next question, so will other genre artists that are not in the trend or list can also develop a bigger presence even without backing of big studios? And will FDI help this? So I think this is also addressed to Ms. Domingo.
Yes. Yes. In the present sphere, everybody has a chance for their own platform. We have to, the FDIs here will come in not only as ownership of media, but also providing digital platforms like Facebook. It has the biggest penetration. YouTube has the biggest penetration, but the country is not getting a cent out of it. So if we open up, new players come in, or YouTube could put something here, Facebook could put something here, at least we could get a piece of the pie. At the same time, also, this period also is exploring monetization when it comes to content. So if you're an independent artist, you could create your own YouTube account now. You could create your own Facebook account. You have a Patreon account. You explore these accounts. This has monetization values. There are chances for collaboration. And don't hesitate to invest a little for boosting. So you promote this is a revolution actually happening in the cloud. If you see the data, Kustakli, X Battalion, SB19, they are not part of the bigger corporate media groups. These are guerrilla strategies which they developed when in the underground circle, and then eventually able to put themselves there in Facebook with a few investments from friends and those who believed in them. So we have to have more players of those who will believe in our artists. There's another question that that's fearing around. What about we have to get out of the old mentality that we have to be in a corporation to be able to deliver our art, because we have new platforms. We have new platforms of technology that we could use. There is form of monetization. Eventually, this creative inputs will be put in a platform that is more amenable to our talents. That's why regulation, investors are very important, because otherwise it's just going to be like scraping. And it cannot be like that. There has to be some form of social protection. There has to be some form of what they call this, not minimum, I don't want to call it minimum wage, but standard talent fees, especially for those who independent artists that we have. There are a lot of independent artists worldwide who are able to cut across to get through their audience. And that's why I mentioned a while ago, niche marketing or niche audience. Because once that you put your talent out there, there is a chance for you to, to be discovered globally. But it has to have grit and also a full support for the infrastructure in the country and all those things. That's why I hope that I answered the question. But eventually, it's not only limiting to ownerships, but also other investments like startups, more digital platforms, and all. Because yeah, as Dr. Villegas have said, the industry is becoming a super industry. It's not only media itself. It's not only IT itself. It's not only education itself. It's not only art. It's those, and then we are putting everything in the cloud. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Domingo. And so for our next question, this is from Dominic Solpico. So the question is, what is the experience of developed countries with regards to foreign participation in mass media and advertising? How about the experience of neighboring countries in the Asia Pacific? Okay, so I think Mr. Forbes can answer the question of Mr. Dominic.
Well, I'm American, and the United States is the most open economy in the world. We welcome foreign investment, and historically, we've received the largest amounts of foreign investment. The same is true for, I can also talk about the other members of the Joint Foreign Chambers because we study these issues. Today, Japan, Korea, the Europeans, Australia, and New Zealand are open to Filipino investment. And Filipinos do invest there. one Filipino company in agribusiness is the largest Filipino investor in the United States by buying their distributor in the United States for $2 billion US. So they're open and to media. There's some restrictions on media ownership, but we have an Australian national who became a global media superstar that acquired Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. Readers of the Financial Times probably don't realize by reading that old pink newspaper that it's owned by Nikkei in Tokyo. Nikkei magazine is the best English language source of business and economic news in Asia. I didn't put up the slide, we didn't get to developing it, showing you that Tokyo, Korea, other cities around Asia allow foreign ownership of advertising, and they have a lot of business. So there's absolutely no reason to continue the restriction on advertising in the Philippines. If you want jobs, if you want the best advertising in the world, and the multinationals that are located here, when they want to do advertising for the Philippine market, with some exceptions, don't use the local agencies. Because I'm sad to say the local agencies don't have the latest technology or the best skill that the big international agencies have. So there's no real reason to justify a continued protection of Philippine advertising industries. Can I add on telecommunications, a recent experience? You may recall when the DICT had a bidding for a third telco, and it wound up going to a Chinese state-owned enterprise, China Telecom, because the president asked the premier of China to bring a Chinese company in. And it's very easy, if the three largest telcos in your country are owned by the government, for the government to ask one of them to come to the Philippines and risk a few $1 billion. That's nothing for China Telecom. They could lose it all and they wouldn't notice. But there were 6 private telcos from Vietnam, 1 from Vietnam, 2 from Japan, 1 from Korea, 1 from Norway, and 1 from the United States, that spent 1 million pesos each to buy the bidding documents. And when they realized that telco was 60-40, they backed away. Now, wouldn't we be better if we had more private Japanese, Koreans, American or European telcos competing in this market? The answer is yes. We can get better technology, better service, more competition, and more consumer satisfaction. And on media, I frankly don't see a lot of major foreign interest in buying local broadcasting or radio or even newspapers. But it'd be interesting to see whether it would be different, because right now everybody has access, right? I get my International New York Times delivered every morning. By the time I wake up, I have it. New York, they don't have to buy a local newspaper. I think your local press will continue as it is. Maybe some of them want to sell, maybe somebody will want to buy. Right now, that can happen in most countries, it can't happen here. The important thing about removing the restriction, as Dr. Jerry Sikat, we were all together, Dr. Villegas, Dr. Sikat, and others in the meeting in the House of Representatives on lifting these restrictions. And Dr. Jerry Sikat, who was the first Director General of NEDA, said, opening up sends a signal. We go back to my last slide that shows the door closed. Congressman Logban asked me, what's the clamor to come in? And I said, Congressman, there's no clamor. Your doors are closed. Everybody knows your door's closed. They're busy investing elsewhere. So those other countries are getting the benefit of global FDI, global technology. And the Philippines is slipping behind. I've watched it slip behind Indonesia, behind Thailand, behind Vietnam. That's why this series is so important. These advocacies are so important, is to help the country of 109 million people become more progressive and more developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes, for answering that question. Now let us proceed to another question from Renato, Mr. Renato R. So I think he wants to be clarified because his question is, what I understand is foreign ownership on advertising is limited to 30% ownership. Is this correct? So I think maybe Dr. Villegas can clarify and elaborate this to Mr. Renato.
Yes, just 30% of foreign ownership of the capital. But really, I'm glad the question was asked. You know, one very important reason why we have to accelerate this process of opening up to foreign capital is the result of the pandemic. Long-term capital has significantly dried up. Our government right now is getting overborrowed. And as you just read, banks have one of their highest rate of non-performing loans. In order to really get the Philippines into Industrial Revolution 4.0, you know, our greatest assets are our talents. We're among the best singers, best designers, name it. And I'm sure Mr. Mercado will expound on that in their AmCham webinar. But we need a lot of capital for the hardware, for the infrastructure. And that's not available locally. And that is why we have to make sure that we can get even 100% foreign ownership in these strategic industries so they can bring in capital together with technology. As John said, when foreigners see that they can only own 40% here, 30% here, they won't risk their long-term capital, which comes always with technology. You know, we missed the boat in Industrial Revolution 1.0, which was the age of mechanization. We missed the boat in Industrial Revolution 2.0, which was the electric revolution. We're still struggling in our energy industry. We missed the boat in the electronics 3.0 revolution. We can actually be among the front runners in Industrial Revolution 4.0 because we have the human resources, but we don't have the long-term capital. And that's another reason why we have to remove all those restrictions.
Izza, can I add something to what Dr. Bernie just said? And I link in the fact that Korean singers in Korean telenovelas were rated so high in what Ella told us about earlier. Netflix spent $500 million on Dragon Studio in Seoul, not as investors, but to fund 24 Korean telenovelas 2020. How much money that create for the Korean economy? The Korean economy, we know, in industrial, with Hyundai and Honda and all those big chaebolls under Park Chung-hee. But having done that in building ships and cars, etc., which Philippines has not done to export, they decided to go creative as well. It's a model for the Philippines. But who mans the George Lucas studio in Singapore? Filipinos. Why doesn't George Lucas have a studio in Manila so the Filipinos can work here and make entertainment that can be watched around the world? That's the question. You have to enable the environment. The talent is there. The environment is enabled. The investors will come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes. Okay,
may I add to that also?
Yeah,
I just
sure,
have to follow up with Mr. Forbes. I also emphasized representation because talent, the talent in entertainment worldwide, is composed of mostly Filipino designers, Filipino animators, Filipino singers, but still our content, our original content is not there out. It's not out there. So if we have more investors for this, if they could come in and enable our environment to have a platform for us to be able to create. We have that. We are doing this. No, 13. However, still it was partially funded, and it was partially funded by foreign national. And then it's in Netflix. We were able to bid in Netflix. It's a very difficult process. So it seems that our content really has potential, and also more content is needed, more investments are needed. So we should have an open mind. Don't be too afraid, because this is a period of hives, little small audiences for more content. It's it's not like before, where content is agenda set. Now agenda setting is crumbling down, and we are going to show what we can, and it's time. So that's it.
Thank you very much to our panelists. Okay, and then next, our question is from Marvin Laranio. So he said legally it is held that FDI is prohibited in the country. So however, we are all aware that numerous business owners only set some Filipinos as dummy and paper owners of their businesses in the country. So any comments? So maybe Dr. Villegas can give his comment first po.
Yes, that's true. That's the funny thing. There are restrictions, but some Filipinos circumvent the law and they act as dummies. But that's exactly why we have to legitimize all of these investments and not live with this parody that we say we limit, and then Filipinos really just act as dummies. So in order to prevent that illegal situation, we should just open up. So that's another reason why we just have to open up, so we don't give opportunities to these Filipinos who want to circumvent the law to be used as dummies.
We don't have dummies in the United States. We're open to foreign investors. They have to follow our laws, of course, but we don't need workarounds. We have some restrictions. Every country has some restrictions. We have aviation and maritime cabotage, but generally we're extremely open. And anybody in this audience wants to invest in the United States, we'll tell you how. We welcome your dollars.
Thank you very much.
We welcome immigrants too. We welcome your talents. We're a nation of immigrants.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Villegas and Mr. Forbes. So let us now proceed with the next question. This is from Mr. Elmer Montales. So what and how can the creative sector contribute, innovate, and assist in the local communities in engaging quick income and generate temporary jobs in the times of the pandemic? So maybe Ms. Ella Domingo can answer po the question.
The creative sector has to go back to its feet first before it can give up. There are many things that that can be done about that if we have the funds for that. Local, okay. So I was doing a lot of scanning for example, for a town, and then I found out that there's this town in Batangas where the highest engagement score for that town is a local product. So we didn't know that. So if we're going to put more effort into research and see what resonates more with our audience, we will be able to come up with some plan and recommendations for the LGU on how they can be able to figure out how to monetize these arts and crafts that their communities have, which resonates also to all Filipinos who read that article. So it cannot be a quick income scheme, because quick income schemes are assigned in another department. There's a thing that's assigned to that. But if you're going to put a plan out there, it's good to invest. If you could baseline what you have, what resonates, what's most popular in your town, and then how are you going to be able to elevate that into a product that your town can produce. And this is a period also where people, this could be a proxy to tourism. You know, the local products could be a proxy to tourism, since we are still limited in terms of traveling. At least be able to come up with, figure out, number one, what is popular there. Number two, what people want. Not only there, and then number three, have ample investments, which could also open up the economy furthermore when we open. That is the power of what big data analytics and also the internet is, to be able to figure out what our country or our citizens, or what our friends from other regions and from all over the country. So that's my takeaway for that.
Thank you very much, Miss Ella Domingo. So let us now go to our last question. This is from Mr. Rockford Maunest. So to Mr. John, so this is addressed to Mr. Forbes. Is it possible if the economic restrictions will be lifted or eased, this will lessen the flight of Filipino people leaving the country? So your thoughts on this, sir?
Oh, that's a very good question. Absolutely. I think it's great that so many Filipinos do sacrifice to go abroad so they can support their families, but it's not great that the government has allowed this to happen. So by removing these restrictions, by doing many things that will help increase FDI into the country, that will help create more jobs in the future for Filipinos to stay here. Absolutely, that's my answer. Izza, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes. So let us take last two questions. Yeah. Last two questions. So this is from from an anonymous attendee. So a corporate agenda dominates Philippine mass media today. So the idea of more players sounds great according to the attendee. So except that in this case, more player means more corporate players. So won't FDIs in the mass media sector mean the new players are going to be corporate? So Dr. Villegas maybe can answer the question.
Well, let me follow up what John mentioned about our being able to retain a lot more people here. The BPO IT industry, fortunately, was not included in the restriction. And so you have 1.3 million very talented Filipino workers in call centers, in animation, medical transcription that are in the Philippines. Many of these companies are really foreign owned. Now that could be what can happen if we allow the creative industries also to have 100% equity like the BPO IT corporations. So a lot of them definitely will be large corporations because we want to create, this equivalent of the 1.3 million BPO IT workers. There will always be room, as Ms. Domingo was saying, for startups that are actually servicing these large corporations. But definitely the big increase will be in the corporate sector, employing millions of very creative Filipinos who do not have to migrate to other countries.
Thank you very much, Dr. Villegas. Maybe Mr. Forbes can add on to that.
Well, I would just add to that. There's an amendment to the Foreign Investment Act, President of the Senate, and there's also an Innovation Act that was recently enacted. And the minimum foreign investment right now is 100,000 that's allowed if you hire 50 Filipinos. So the amendment to that act is to reduce the 50 to 15. But we've also suggested to the Senate, the foreign chambers, that in line with the Innovation Act, you allow an innovator for as little as 100,000 to come in. We really need foreign people with ideas, people that can rapidly scale up and get financing will create a lot of jobs. Also, you have to reduce the tax rates. We have 30%. Startups were starting here, but then they were moving to Singapore and hiring Filipinos to work in Singapore because the tax was 17% there. They didn't want to pay the 30%. There are many, many things that need to be fixed, but this is a very, very good start. On corporates, you want everything. The corporates can create a lot of jobs. Within my own chamber, the American Chamber, our largest employer employs 100,000 Filipinos in the sector that Dr. Bertie was just talking about, BPO. And I would just want to add, this also helps to answer one of the earlier questions, the freelancers. There's an incredible number, over 1 million freelancers currently operating as individual consultants. And some of them do accounting, right, for clients all over the world. You can make a living by doing that online. But some of them are web designers, or they do all sorts of things that are in the field of creative industry. So that's certainly already happening. But the corporates, as I just cited, one American company that started here small, now which employs 250,000 people around the world in BPO. The largest site is here in the Philippines with 100,000.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes and Dr. Villegas, for answering that question. Now we are down to our last question. So here, the question is, if a Chinese government influenced corporation becomes a major player in the Philippines media market, won't the content inevitably be propagandistic in nature? Even if it isn't obvious, all they have to do is have a policy that says you can't mention Tiananmen. So that's a propagandistic policy already. So what steps will the government take to prevent this? So maybe Dr. Villegas can answer po.
Well, first of all, it can be government laws. You know, government laws can, for example, regulate content of Amazon, Facebook, as they're doing in Australia. So it doesn't have to be addressed to ownership, but it can be addressed to content, for example. So that's where we have to be very creative in our legislative work of making sure that those situations do not happen. There are ways to prevent those types of practices. And we can learn from the other countries now that are increasingly, even China itself is regulating Amazon and so on and so forth. So we can do the same thing locally. So we need very good people in Congress to be vigilant about the way some of these foreign-owned companies can subvert certain national interests.
Sure, Mr. Forbes, you can add on to the answer of Dr. Villegas.
I think all Philippine newspapers will run pages and pages of news that's provided by Chinese news agencies. I see it in the Star, I see it in the Bulletin, etc. It's a form of advertising. It doesn't say it's an advertising, but it's content. And certainly on cable TV, you can watch Chinese television broadcasts as well. So that content is already here. I'm not so sure you should so much stop the flow of information, even if it's propaganda, but you need to educate the consumer to know what's correct and what's not correct.
Thank you very much for answering the question. And to our panelists, Mr. Forbes, Dr. Villegas, and Ms. Ella Domingo. So that ends our question and answer portion. So in as much as we all want all questions to be raised, we also need to have our lunch. So to formally close this session, may I call on the Supervising Project Officer for Policy and Research Development of the Center for Local and Constitutional Reform. May I call on Professor Eric Daniel de Torres. Prof, good morning po.
Yes, good morning, Izza. Good morning to our participants. First of all, we'd like to thank our partners here, especially the Konrad-Adenauer-Stiftung. Of course, with Ms. Tonette De Jesus and Mr. Jerome Hogno, and of course, Dr. Yost. Um, Also to our Chief Project Management Officer, Ms. Pamela Dayan Carbonell. Good day, ma'am. And to our distinguished panelists and presenters for this session. Of course, our high respect to Ms. Ella Domingo of Blueprint.PH, Mr. John Forbes, and to our advocate and partner, Dr. Bernie Villegas. We really appreciated this specific session for allowing us to learn that the advertising, the creative industry provides many opportunities for us. However, the problem really lies on the framework on how our constitution was actually built, how our constitution was actually designed. I'd like to give emphasis on what Dr. Villegas made mention, that there are already lots of opportunities that we actually lost from how we intend to go about taking off during the 90s. And of course, reiterating what Mr. John Forbes mentioned of how he witnessed that Philippines slipped and was overtaken by many Southeast Asian countries. So I think this is a wake-up call for us, and hopefully, and we are appealing to our audience to support our campaign towards engaging our policymakers. I think we're already halfway there. We were able to pass RBH2. Now the bottleneck is in the Senate on how we intend to convince our senators that this is really good for our country. And more importantly, I think it's really kind of frustrating that a lot of there are many good talents here in the Philippines, but sadly, other countries are benefiting from these talents and skills. So with that, I hope that we will, for our participants, thank you very much, and I hope we will be able to see you in the next session. So with that, thank you very much, and keep safe. God bless us all.
Thank you very much, Professor Eric de Torres. But before we end our forum for today, may I ask for a closing remarks from each of our panelists. So let us first ask for the closing remarks from Mr. John Forbes.
Well, I'll be very brief. I know everybody really wants to get on to lunch. We've given you enough food for thought today. But I encourage this campaign to make the country more aware of the benefits of foreign investment and lead to a successful outcome to remove these restrictions and to allow more foreign investment into the country so we can be better partners, as we already are, but even better partners with future growth of the Philippines and employment and reduction of poverty. Thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Forbes. Ms. Ella Domingo.
Okay, so on behalf of Blueprint.PH and our CEO, Iro Brillantes, I thank you for this opportunity. And just one note is the Filipinos are born creatives, and we have so much talent to show the world. We can even replicate or do more with what South Korea and Thailand are doing when it comes to industry. And we should be able to put ourselves out there and be able to show and showcase everything that we can do creatively. We have, especially the new generation, the children that are coming, and they're very creative. They can write, they can sing, they can model effortlessly. So it's very natural. And we should always be able to capitalize on these things and improve on ourselves and reach our potential as a nation. And also, always be, what do you call this? Always be able to see things scientifically provided by the data analytics or the data that we have for better decision making. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Domingo. And of course, a closing message also from Dr. Villegas.
Well, I'd just like to reiterate, relating this issue to the problem that has been created by the pandemic. Our unemployment rate is now at 7.1%, means more than 4 million people are employed. Poverty incidence has gone back to over 20%. So, and I emphasize the need for long-term capital, because you cannot generate employment with short-term capital. And we are now suffering from domestic shortage. And so let's now relate this whole issue of attracting foreign direct investments to the crisis that has been created by the pandemic. And probably, since we'll not be able to totally push this agenda in this administration, let's bring this issue during the election period and ask the candidates about their views about allowing more capital to come to the Philippines by removing these restrictions in our constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Villegas. And thank you all once again for being with us today. To Ms. Pamela Dayan Carbonell, Ms. Tonette De Jesus, Secretary Martin Andanar, to our speaker, Mr. John Forbes, Ms. K. Domingo, and Professor Eric De Torres, and of course, Dr. Bernardo Villegas. Also, thank you to our participants and members of the press for being with us today. I know everyone is excited to know the schedule of our session 6. So I am pleased to announce the details of our next session entitled Energy Services and Renewable Energy in the New Normal on July 23, 2021, the same time as this session and on the same venues. Do like the social media accounts of the DILG and all of our partners for updates about the next session. Now, just some last reminders for all of our participants. Post-evaluation link will be sent to your email, so please help us improve more of our activity. All presentations will be available on G Drive, so kindly check your emails after this session so you can browse and review. Certificates will be upon request, so please wait for the post-session email we will be sending so you can have your requests sent. Registration for session 6 will be sent to your emails as well, or you may check our Facebook pages, DILG, CORE, and CRC for the link. Should you want to review the whole session, you can watch the live recording on our Facebook pages flash as we end this session. Once again, thank you very much and see you on July 23. Keep safe, everyone. Bye.